Welcome to the Indian Gaming Association's The New Normal webcast. My name is Lisa Johnson. I'm the conference manager for the Indian Gaming Trade Show and Convention. I'd like to share a few housekeeping tips before we get started. Everyone is muted by default except for our speakers. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Victor Rocha, conference chairman of the Indian Gaming Association.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the New Normal, your go-to source for discussions on the gaming industry and key issues facing Native American tribes. I'm Victor Rocha, Conference Chairman of the Indian Gaming Association, joined by my co-host Jason Giles. Good morning, Jason.
Morning, Victor.
Jason, obviously Executive Director of the Indian Gaming Association and very, very smart guy. Such a fun guy to work with. Today, we're talking to our friend Scott Crowell, Principal at Crowell Law Office, Tribal Advocacy Group. Sorry, Scott. And our dear friend Joseph Webster, partner at Hobbs Strauss. Scott, I'm so sorry about that. I'm still working on my first cup of coffee. So, gentlemen, let's jump right in. Let's start with sweepstakes. So, yesterday we had the latest development, AB 831, a bill aimed at shutting down sweepstakes casinos and their dual coin model operating in illegal gray areas. And then after that, we're going to talk about Attorney General Bonta, his recent opinion on daily fantasy sports, and which has caused quite a stir in the industry. And even if we get lucky, maybe at the very end too, we could talk about the big beautiful bill taxation thing. So I don't know. It just sounds like lots to discuss here. So, gentlemen, Scott, what happened yesterday? Did you watch the hearings?
I did not have an opportunity to watch the hearings, but Joe and I just met with Michael Honig this morning, who testified at the hearings. So we have a pretty good rundown of how it went, and of course the result was great, which was unanimous passage out of committee of the bill.
Yeah, that. I think everybody was shocked by that too because it initially came out. I see there was five abstentions. Now I see the sweepstake guys are whining like stuck pigs, but I have to tell you, I don't think anybody's buying their arguments. It just all seems very weak and very disingenuous. One of the things they're talking about was they went after Sam Manuel again, and Michael testified. I'm sure that's the wrong person to have up there, right?
Well, the what's so
For
infuriating.
them, I mean.
Yeah, what's so infuriating for that comparison is, Sam Manuel is offering, a true social platform. You can play and be entertained on their platform, but you can't make wagers for real money and real return, which is, where you step over the line from legal to illegal in the sweepstakes arena.
I can't believe they use that argument. I mean, were they aware that people could hear them? Did they know there were other people in the room when they used that argument? I mean, because it's just absolutely ridiculous, you know?
Well, it is, and it's one of those things to where, the conversations I have with general people generally, they don't understand, what's really going on, so it might be worth a moment to spell that out. When you sign up for these sweepstakes sites, they start out, exactly like a social gaming site. It's sign up, and here's, $5,000 worth of quote red coins that you can use to make wagers on slots or video poker or a whole variety of games. And when you run out of those, well, you know what? You can spend, say, $500, and we'll give you another set of these gold coins. But in addition to those gold coins, we're going to give you for free, $500 worth of sweepstakes coins. And those sweepstakes coins can be used for real live wagers, dollar for dollar, as if you were on in, an actual full casino, pay for money, return for money indication. And this notion that the $500 is for the free coins and you're getting the sweepstakes for value coins for free, is just so bogus. It doesn't pass the smell test. But that's what the sweepstakes that are they're targeted by this bill. That's what they're doing. Salmonwell and True social gaming sites, don't offer that, live for money option. And the notion that they're the same, which is what, I understand was, suggested yesterday, is equally bogus.
Well, with 10-0 out of the committee, it doesn't seem like anybody bought that argument. You
Right.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
Anybody that truly understands what's going on, realizes that this is, illegal online gaming.
Joe, Joe,
Joe, what is this?
yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead, Joe.
Oh,
What does this
Jason,
do
no, you're smart.
for the landscape here? Uh, obviously California is an important state when they make a move like this. What's it looking like? Uh, you think this will start an avalanche against these guys? Is it already happening?
I think it's already happening. I think you're seeing state by state
Mhm.
changes in legislation to more specifically address this model. Seeing AG opinion, seeing enforcement action, and seeing a lot of lawsuits being filed, and not just and frankly, not primarily by states, but a lot of private lawsuits. There was not California and elsewhere. So I think it's been encouraging to see that. And I do think, when you're, taking a step back and looking at this, this model threatens, tribal exclusivity across the country because yes, they're offering video slot games, but some of these so-called sweepstakes sites, they're offering sports betting, they're offering table games, they're offering slots. And so it's really the whole range of gaming that tribes are supposed to, in many cases, have exclusivity for, is just being run over by these operators.
And one of the big issues that you see companies like Fliff, which are doing sports betting. I mean, there's just no way around it. This is sports betting. This is illegal in California right now. And there was a big announcement the other day that Lawrence Escalante, Lambo Larry from VGW, is starting a new company to exploit that area. So but what I predicted, 10 months ago is coming to fruition. And I knew these guys were gonna run and run and run until they came to California. And it seems to me this is where they want to make their final stand. You know what I mean? After California, when this is done, they're not going to have much oxygen left after that. I think Texas is coming right behind us. You know what I mean? Especially when it's this egregious exploitation. You know, so why are they in California? Why are they making this last stand? Is it the lack of cease and desist? Is that why they're testifying so badly?
I mean, we have to, certainly, turn to Scott in a minute, but I think one reason is, yes, the lack of enforcement by the state, that certainly allows them, space to operate, and certainly the fact that the market is so large, and at this point, there isn't a legal competitive product, so they're able to effectively fill the market with what they're offering, which, again, I think we all think is illegal. But they're not, there's not been a lot of challenge and there's not much competition.
Well, it's really quite amazing if you think about it, is that if you pull that thread, how much of this ecosystem gaming just falls apart. You know what I mean? It's like, to me, as somebody in Pachunga.net who reads everything, you can see, all these affiliate sites that do news and stuff, they're like falling all over themselves to like look at these tea leaves and say, oh, this is bad for the tribes. Good example was this these AstroTurf, but AstroTurf sending in emails and a social media campaign to come out and stand up for the sweepstakes things. I was reading through some of them, and these people was like, I'm against these California bans, and the guy's from Virginia. You know what I mean? So This is what they're going to run into. I think when you go on the legality of it and the exploitation of it, they just lose all the way around. And I think after California, and by the way, um, this bill is not perfect. Now, one of the big issues that reminds me is that they talked about this gut and amend process. Now, Scott, you and I have been around a long time here, and this is not the first time we've seen this type of use. I think it's the screaming just feels very fake and insincere. You know what I mean, Scott?
Well, it is. Yeah, I mean, understand on a qualitative position, that, people believe that, the legislative process, should be, fully transparent. But the reality is, and this isn't limited to gaming issues or tribal issues, but all issues that, and virtually all legislatures, at least those I've worked with, to where at the front end of the legislature, they will literally, introduce, a series of bills, to actually serve as placeholders so that when they can deal with a timely topical issue that has to move before the session ends, they have someplace to land and get it done. And that's what happens here. And we complain about it when we're on the other side, and like it when we're on the same side. But the reality is that it's just a very ordinary procedure in the legislative process.
I
Wow.
mean, so DraftKings and FanDuel, Victor, they've said they're going to keep operating in the state. Uh, so they're looking for a showdown on this.
Well, that's DFS. They'll still say now. The interesting thing about this is that actually FanDuel and DraftKings are on the same side, and the SBA testified yesterday against the sweepstakes. So that's it, and we're going to be going up to that issue too. So, but right now, we are on the same page with the SBA, which should scare the sweeps people, and it does. Which hysterical that they start talking, oh my God, the hypocrisy, the tribes are talking to the SBA and stuff like that. What they're doing, they always knew the hammer was going to come down. And I always said we were going to bring the hammer down and we're bringing our friends. You know what I mean? That was obvious from the very beginning. That's the way, and going back, Scott, that's the way the game is played. We didn't invent the rules. You know what I mean? This is the way the game is played. The political game is played. We didn't invent it, but we sure know how to play it. And
Right.
but there's a lot of there's some interesting people on the other side. I think there's some legitimate concerns, and I think there's some bogus concerns. But I think a little clarity is a good thing, right, Scott?
Well, I do, but and I don't, I support the bill. I want to be clear about that. But I don't know that you need additional clarity. The reality is that prior to this bill or without this bill, sweepstakes is still illegal in California. The problem is, and we'll talk about DFS here in a minute, is regardless of how clear we are regarding the illegality of an activity, it continues. And my concern, as it relates to translating this bill to actually getting sweepstakes out of California, is that those that have the capacity to enforce the law, like Attorney General Bonta, will look at that and say, well, the legislature is dealing with this. So in the meantime, I'll just do nothing, which is what I've been doing since I've come into office, and allow the activity to continue. This isn't, the first state, as Joe mentioned. There are a number of states that have enacted these sweepstakes prohibitions, over the last few years, and you're seeing a huge uptick in state regulatory agencies issuing cease and desist letters, and actually they're being effective. The cease and desist letters are resulting in the companies getting out of that state. But unlike it where it used to be that if you did something illegal in one state and action was taken against you, then other states would would follow shortly behind, that's not what has been happening. Hopefully, what we're seeing now, with this huge uptick in both enforcement action by cease and desist letters and these sweepstakes bills getting through, that you'll see this concerted effort amongst the enforcement entities in the various states, to bring this industry to an end. This is what happened with the internet cafes, a decade ago, and I think that we're seeing a repeat of history as it relates to sweepstakes.
I agree. I agree. Absolutely, Scott. I think it's the thing. Joe, what's your take on this? What are we missing here?
I think Scott's right that the key is the follow-up. It's the enforcement that you have. One, I agree that in some sense the law is already clear. That the way that these things are being operated today doesn't pass muster. I think you know the legislation certainly makes that even more clear. But regardless of what the legislation says, unless you do get the follow through enforcement, I do worry, like Scott, that these companies are going to continue to operate and kind of along those lines, one of the aside from the whole issue of tribal exclusivity, there's the whole public policy issue that these companies aren't regulated, and a lot of them are based offshore. You don't know who's involved, where the money's coming from in terms of potential bad actors. So just from a kind of a broad public policy standpoint, this shouldn't be a hard sell to state regulators and state enforcement authorities to shut it down, particularly when the statutory language I think is abundantly clear.
Yeah, but this, it always seems like you have to take it sometimes the responsibility into your own hands. Sometimes government moves slow, and I mean, how long did it take for them to take lead out of paint chips? You know what I mean? So you had to sue it, and I think this is digital paint chips. That's what we're dealing with here. You know. So so what's next for this bill? So it moves out of the Public Safety Committee, moves next to the Public Safety Committee, and then appropriations and stuff like that. So, Scott, do we know the process? But I mean, 15-0, I think we'll see some modifications. I didn't see McDonald's or Starbucks testifying against it yesterday, like the sweepstake guys like to align themselves with. So I assume the cheese stands alone from what I'm seeing. I see some of the AstroTurf groups. I saw an advertising, the World Poker Tour, right? Is that who we saw yesterday? Which happens to do business in Indian country. I thought that was interesting. Now, I noticed over the last week there's been a big scandal with them and $1 million play that was doing with one of the sweepstakes companies. So they're in bed with them. So that shouldn't be surprising to anyone that's paying attention. I don't know the exact specifics right now because I don't care, but I'll look it up so I get my mind around it too. So, Jason, what do you think?
Well, I mean, is this something, Joe, that, tribal
Oh, yeah.
regulatory bodies should start drafting their own,
Point.
regulations that, against this, just to make it clear that,
I think tribes certainly can, and I think in most cases, even without specific regulations, tribal regulators could issue their own
Okay, same thing.
enforcement actions,
Mhm.
and potentially even bring suit in federal court for against these companies for offering gaming in violation of their tribal state compact, because they're certainly not authorized to offer Class 3 gaming. Of course, that then gets to trying to go through the whole court process. But you're right. I mean, tribes certainly have an opportunity, particularly if state enforcement isn't forthcoming. But
Mhm.
that's yeah. So I think that is something to look at.
Yeah, I do believe that we have to really push, our state regulatory partners, to step up the enforcement action. As much as I do believe that tribes have, jurisdiction to issue the cease and desist letters, and the activity occurring on tribal lands is, clearly illegal. But just like you see, these cease and desist letters result in these companies getting out of a state. If I'm one of these operators and I get such a letter from a tribe, I'll just geofence off that tribe's Indian lands and continue to do what I'm doing. And the problem remains, the cannibalization remains. Going back to a point that, that Joe said earlier, is that, and I think one of the issues that we have to address in California, is there's this huge demand, for this online gaming activity. And if the players don't have, a legal, regulated environment where they can, play the games that they want to play, where the players pass license suitability standards, and you have regulatory internal controls to ensure the fairness of the game, and embrace public policy protections like ensuring that players are of age and have access to problem gambling help, etc. This unregulated illegal environment is going to seize on the vacuum that's created by that legal option not being available. And in California, that's what we're looking at. If you compare that, say, with a state like Michigan, where you shut down all these illegal operations, and the players still have the ability to play their games in a legal, regulated environment. Um, uh, you know, they have somewhere to turn, where in California you don't. So I think this folds into our larger discussion of how and when the California tribes will put an initiative in front of the California voters to allow them a legal platform in which to play these games.
You're absolutely right, Scott. And the issue we're talking here really is technology moving faster than the speed of the law, technology moving faster than we know, than we're prepared for. And all of a sudden, you wake up one day, I think I've used this analogy a couple times, is that, someone's in your bed. You know what I mean? And the fact that the tribes aren't occupying that space, although they're preparing, there's always somebody willing to fill that thing. And I think without teeth, enforcement is nothing. A wagging a finger is not going to do. Me here, acting like an insane man isn't going to do it either. I think, we really need enforcement. And, that's why I've been screaming from the top of the rooftops, disgorgement is the only thing that these guys are going to understand. Now, the other big thing that we have here is that we have a lot of regulated industry in here too. You have payment processors, and WorldPay is in here, and, who else is in there? There's other companies like that are doing business in Indian country, that are doing business with commercial guys, right? Who are trying to avoid this ugly question for them. Why are you in this market? Why are you taking this money? Why are you violating the sovereignty of the tribes in California? And so I think this is the place, California is the place where this all ends. You know what I mean? And I think the reason why they're not running, the why you see them here, it's quite hysterical. All their spokesmen are just so bad. Even their lobbyists are just really bad because they just don't have an argument. You know what I mean? It just everything. So, and enough about me. I'm sorry. Let me get off my rant. Joe, you can tell me how bad I am after we get off the phone.
Well, but I mean, Victor, let's just real quick, the daily fantasy sports stuff.
Let's go into this.
Over to that. I mean, you know, again, Joe, it's a public policy issue, and the way DraftKings and FanDuel 5-6 years ago just entered flooded the zone across the country when they first started rolling stuff out. All these questions about legality and whether a state can still set its public policy on gaming. Hopefully, I think it's coming back, but you know, over all of this, you got this crazy CFTC with, you know, allowing Kalshi and these guys to do stuff. Where for the daily fantasy sports with Attorney General Bonta, you know, coming out now against it, how does that impact the gaming industry? Because FanDuel and DraftKings are not going to go, you know, lightly into the night over this, and they've got a lot of options now. Maybe they just say, "Screw it, we're going to just do the call sheet model." Uh, you know, where do you think this is headed?
Yeah, obviously a really good question. And I guess, first of all, I'll say I think the opinion that the Attorney General issued is very well done. And he basically agrees with what tribes have been saying for years, that existing law prohibits these activities, whether they're pick 'em, whether they're draft style, that existing California law doesn't allow this activity. And I thought it was good too that the AG didn't uh buy at all the argument that somehow the amount of skill was relevant. That dismiss that completely, saying essentially, whether there's skill or not, it still falls within the statutory prohibition for sports betting. He didn't answer the question about whether it may violate other provisions, such as being an illegal lottery. But with respect to sports betting, strong opinion laying out and basically refuting argument after argument that he had received from the fantasy sports industry about why they thought why they argued that these were permitted. So you're right. So now what comes next? Well, I think as we were saying a few minutes ago, while it's good to have an opinion like this or a statute that provides clarity, unless there's follow-on enforcement, it doesn't really get you very far. And so to me, I think that's the key now, is to really put the pressure on the state actors to say, okay, this is, the Attorney General's assessment of the law, it needs to be enforced. Now, I'll quickly caveat that one thing that I thought was unfortunate was, seeing then a statement out of the governor's office indicating that the governor disagrees with the AG opinion. So I think those are the types of things that frankly, aren't helpful in terms of trying to get enforcement. So, but I think, look, it's a victory, getting the opinion out there, but now it's again, keeping the pressure up to make sure that this is acted upon. I think in terms of the different operators, it may depend a little bit on the specific company. Certainly companies that are licensed in other jurisdictions, it seems, this is something that could, present some licensing risk. But a lot of the operators, they don't have gaming licenses, so they're less affected by it. But I take this as, like I said, it's a victory. It's a strong opinion. It took a while to get it, but now that it's out, I think it really closes the door on some of these arguments. But it's got to be enforced.
If I can, add to that, I was at one of these SBA meetings in Temecula, week
Last
before
week.
last.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and it had been, the rumors were out that the Attorney General opinion was going to come out, but it hadn't come out yet. But DraftKings and FanDuel's, were in the room, and they were expressly asked, if this opinion says DFS is illegal, are you going to cease your operation of DFS in California? And they responded that, we're not going to, operate any illegal gaming in California. And now that the opinion's out, they're announcing that they have every intention to continue to operate. So for those that think that DraftKings and FanDuel's have suddenly seen the light in terms of working with California tribes, heed what's actually going on here is they're two of the largest operators of DFS in the state. DFS has now been clearly identified by the Attorney General to be illegal, and they've announced that they have every intention to continue to operate those games. I agree with Joe. The opinion was extremely well written and extremely thorough. I was really frustrated in how long it took for them to issue the opinion, but I am gratified by the thoroughness and completeness of it. But back to my earlier comment about Attorney General Bonta, this opinion didn't say, well, now it's illegal. This opinion has concluded that it's been illegal all along. And Attorney General Bonta used the fact that this opinion was being written, frankly, as an excuse to do nothing in terms of enforcement action against, this illegal activity. And during the 2 years that the opinion was being written, the volume of DFS in California, continued to grow. They've announced partnerships with, major sports teams within the state, so you would expect that now that it's been made clear, and he did a very good job. He didn't leave much open for them to play whack-a-mole and change this and tweak that and say, oh, okay, well, now it's legal. He really thoroughly went through all the different ways the game could be played and made clear that all of them are illegal under California law. And so what we would expect on that would be an announcement of enforcement action against all these illegal DFS operators. Instead, we're not hearing any of that, and we get this rhetoric out of the governor's office that says, "Oh, well, gee, I I disagree, and I'm looking forward to a dialogue," which is an invitation to continue to do the illegal activity that has been going on, when the purpose and intent of the opinion should be to bring this illegal gaming to an end.
Mhm. What is that, Victor? Since you guys, the California, I mean, does Newsom need fundraising from these guys or what?
He's in South Carolina today. He just tweeted, he just put on Twitter, happy birthday to Lindsey Graham, and he's campaigning in South Carolina. I swear to God, he's in South Carolina today. So what does that tell you?
Happy birthday to
And
Lindsey.
the other thing that made me laugh was this
Probably
whole
more than he gets from Trump.
yeah, well, listen, his whole strategy right now, he was just on Joe Rogan. He's going to go on Theo Vaughn. He's going to go, he's going for the bro vote. You know what I mean? So that's what you're seeing. But the other thing was the Stephen A. Smith faux outrage. If you go to Prize Pick, he's our exclusive celebrity picker or whatever. His whole thing is through Prize Picks too. So, that's who you're dealing with. But I think my take is, I think we're all pretty aware that I don't know anything about sports, nor do I care about sports. But I do know that some people like it. A lot of people like it. It seems to be very popular. But I think the technology has changed it into a gambling product, from a leisure product to a gambling product, and that's what technology, and that's what the whole thing was about. And I think we've all been down this path before, as with class two and historical racing machines and skill games, and the list goes on and on and on and on. This is just another version of an old fight that we keep having, which is technology moving faster than the speed of law, you know? So I think my take is, and I can't wait to sit at the table to help them redefine what this industry is going to be in the future. Welcome to California. We have an opportunity to redefine everything. We're going to take it. So, is it going to be a fight? Absolutely. Can we win it? Absolutely. I think, you know what? I think I think you can feel it in the air. Something's changed. You know what I mean? You can see the pushback from the public. The gambling in your face all the time. I think this big beautiful bill tax that just came in. It was fascinating to see the lack of compassion and empathy that people have with professional gamblers. They love them in the movies. You know, a great script.
Suppose.
You know what I mean? But in real life, they're like they don't have a lot of empathy and stuff like that. Now, the tribes need to look at from the perspective as gaming professionals and our customers and stuff like that. So, you know, I think we have
Well, Joe,
I
real
think we have a common ground there, but I think the winds have changed. The
Mhm.
winds have changed for sure.
I mean, Joe, in Florida, was Seminole up and operating last fall, or were they still working it out then?
So yeah, they were trying to remember what the relaunch date
Yeah.
was, but yeah, it's been over a year.
Yeah, I was just wondering if they have a full football season under their belt yet, because uh, obviously I think Florida, very populated state. We're going to see a lot of uh, where things can go with how well, because the fall Victor, that's football season, and yeah, so you're going to see a noticeable change in the team
I
viewing
listen,
habits.
I see your lips are moving, but nothing's happened. Does not make any sense.
But I mean, the fantasy sports, how is in Florida, how's that? I mean, it's just there's no real issue there with them operating.
When you say no issue, I mean there was some action that was taken by the Florida Gaming Commission initially against several operators for offering the pick'em style games.
Mhm.
Cease and desist letters. They've changed their product. I think all of them are still operating in the state. But it's a concern. Just like it is elsewhere in the country that they're offering these products that sure look an awful lot like sports betting.
Yeah, and exclusivity has two pieces to it. It identifies who can operate, but if you don't have enforcement to keep out illegal operators, it's a meaningless word. Fortunately in Florida, by knocking down the DFS operators, the players still have a viable, license regulated product to turn to as a result of the DeSantis Seminole Compact.
And Jason, I was just up in Washington, at the Western Washington Indie Gaming Association, and that was the talk of there also. What the threat, even though they have very strong online gaming laws too, you can still download it. You know what I mean? So, I think everyone's coming to the same conclusion is that this is not going away. And by the way, there's all the states that have already acted in the last 9 months. I mean, it's just like timber. You know what I mean? They keep falling and falling and falling. So I think a lot of us are, well, I know I always expected them to make the stand in California. It's just too much money for them to keep running. And this is where they want to fight. And this is where I told you we want to fight them. This is like, welcome to California. Here we are. You know what I mean? So now they're already changing, Scott. I think the big issue here that a lot of people saw that this was looking more like a gambling product. They were the Prize Picks and Underdog were doing house bank games, but FanDuel and DraftKings were doing peer-to-peer, I believe, right? Now, initially they were doing it until about a year ago. Is that what it was? If I remember right, Scott? Maybe we don't know.
Well, that's right. And I think it was Prize Picks that just announced here in the last week that they're switching to peer-to-peer. But as I, was trying to characterize, Bonta's opinion, it made very clear that switching from bank to peer-to-peer doesn't change the fact that it's illegal betting on sports events and therefore a violation of California law.
Yeah, I
So,
think just to focus on just that language, there's a really good footnote for those that have looked at the opinion. It's footnote 74, and the AG says, we are told that some operators offer Pick'em as a peer-to-peer competition in which participants compete against each other to make the highest number of correct predictions. In our view, this version of Pick'em also constitutes sports wagering because the entry fees satisfy the definition of a better wager under Section 337A. So it's absolutely clear, as Scott said, that the AG considered some of these different arguments, and certainly this among others just flatly rejected them.
But you know what? The response was, it's not legally binding. We're not going anywhere. What does that mean?
That means that Attorney General Bonta's got to step up and take enforcement action, or district attorneys, or those that have the capacity to bring this action down and use this opinion as the legal authority to do it, need to step up and actually take enforcement action against these illegal operators. We have seen already an announcement of some of the public interest and class action law firms announced their
I
intentions.
saw that. They didn't waste any time, did they?
Yeah, so hopefully, hopefully people will take this opinion and use it as for the explosive impact that it should have to bring this activity to an end.
It's funny as a Native American, sometimes, Native something will happen and they'll see like a hawk or an eagle and it'll have significance. I saw a turkey vulture. I saw a turkey. I swear to God, I saw a turkey vulture the other day too. So is that
Well,
a sign?
class action lawyers.
Carry on. They like dead things. They like dead things. So I don't know if that was a sign, but I swear to God, I saw it, you know. Wow, there's a lot here. I think listen, I think this is a completely separate issue. I think with sweepstakes, I think sweepstakes is dead in the water. They're just gonna be there's gonna be a boot hill. We're gonna bury them in these other company, over in Sacramento, we can bury these other companies and stuff like that. But I think the argument with DFS and entertainment and what gambling is and what entertainment is, I think these are issues that need to be redefined. I think again, technology has moved so fast. Um, gosh, everybody knows that, the mobile phones are no good for you, but yet everybody has them. Your kid has them. You know, this is the world we live in. So, I think we have to stand up and make the changes we want to see. Or you're gonna get railroaded. So, Jason, what do you got, brother?
Well, we'll probably save it for another day, Victor, but the gaming industry with the bill that passed with now you can only deduct 90% of your losses. That I don't know, it came from Senator Crapo from Idaho, which is just it's just so odd. Like, that shows you how desperate they were, while they're putting $3.5 trillion more dollars to the debt, that they still were trying to just, nickel and dime to get money out of an onion, or just squeezing everywhere they could, and something as stupid as that. And I again, Victor, you said it. We've got a lot of questions about it. The media has been calling, and we're just kind of where we're going to do the Columbo routine and just see how it plays out, because honestly, again, it's not the biggest sympathetic class of people, these high roller gamblers, but at the same time, I don't know anyone personally. Maybe I don't hang around with rich enough people who takes the time to itemize their gambling wins and losses. I'm sure there are people, but it seems to me it's short-sighted. It's going to drive everything offshore if you're a real big time gambler.
Well, it's one of the major motivations for people to sign up for those player programs, so you can get that loss statement at the end of the year.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
There you go, Scott. That's a good point. Yeah.
I don't know if I share the pessimism. I mean, I was, I mean, I think that provision in the bill is nuts. I'm not surprised to hear it came from Senator Crapo. I remember when he was a member of the Idaho legislature, and he, was one of the most vocal resistance to the tribal initiative for slots in Idaho. But I think that a big part of that is not because there's this great sentiment in Congress to support the measure, but that the big beautiful bill moved so fast that people didn't even realize that it was in there until it was too late. I've seen that Congressman Titus has already introduced legislation to get rid of it. I've seen that she's already getting Republican co-sponsorship to it. So even though you're right, the professional gambler is not a sympathetic group when it comes to Congress. I think the notion of owing tax when you have zero income, from the activity, and for those that aren't aware, the way the current law reads that you can deduct your gambling winnings. You can use gambling losses to offset your gambling winnings as it relates to what you report on your return, up to 100%. And this bill says, no, you can only go up to 90%. So if you won $100,000 and lost $100,000, you can only report $90,000 in losses and have to pay tax on the $10,000.
Right.
Now that's a notion that whether it's gambling or any other kind of income generating business, people understand is just inherently unfair. You make zero money and yet still owe tax on it. And so I do think that there's traction to get this new gambler's tax reversed and reversed quickly by Congress.
Yeah, Scott, I'm hearing the same thing. I think the tribes that are starting to think about this and how it's going to affect their programs, and especially in California where we have a very lucrative market and a high-end market,
Well,
it just
Florida,
makes
Joe,
sense.
you've
Makes
got
sense
two
for the tribes. Go ahead, Jason.
Republican senators in Florida that I would imagine, are going to hear about this. Seminole and Miccosukee, I'm sure they have big money guys walking in there all the time. So
I do
It's
think
Florida, Jason. You have to say it real loud so they can
yeah.
hear.
Yeah, I do think there is going to be bipartisan support for fixing this for just the reason Scott said. It just doesn't make any sense. And from a public policy standpoint, as was suggested before, all this does is drive people to the gray area or offshore sites. And so ultimately I think this gets fixed, but in the short term, it's certainly a problem.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, you look at this, I think that's the fascinating part of this industry. You know what I mean? We all fight and we bang against each other. And, in times, we can find a commonality to move forward together too. So I think this is good for the tribes. I think this is good for the industry. And, it's just bad business. It's just bad business. And regardless of what they say, not all Democrats love all taxes. So, here's case in point. Case in point.
This is phantom tax. I mean, this is insane. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, listen, Crapo, is that his name? He looks like
Oh,
Mr.
great.
Burns from The Simpsons. So why is anybody surprised about this at all? You know, nobody should be surprised.
Well, I mean, I love having you guys on because you're
Yeah,
true
yes, thank you so
litigators,
much.
true litigators here, and you know,
So sorry I'm subjecting you guys to me. You know what I mean? You guys don't deserve this and all your hard work, and here you are. I'm so sorry.
When you get the word out, we greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well,
We're
great.
working hard
and
at it.
the work you guys have been doing on the CFTC stuff with the amicus briefs, it's just tremendous, and that's something we're just gonna have to keep I keep saying we're gonna have to be like a dog on the bone on it, Victor, because one of the articles I did read real quick was it did say, given this tax, it could be a boon to people like Kalshi because
Right, right, right. That
just
was
go on their
conventional
website.
wisdom.
Yeah, but I can't imagine that they were that diabolical. Trump Jr. and Crapo and they're thinking that
Well,
deep.
and I don't know if that's a real real advantage either. I think
That's
that
true.
the prediction market contracts still have to issue, the 1099s to their customers. So I don't know, I don't know if this I like the phantom tax label. I don't know if this phantom tax, is exclusive brick
Okay.
and mortar casinos, I think it would be applicable to them as well. Of everything that we've talked about today, I mean, I agree with Victor. I think sweepstakes, it's just a question of time before they're buried. I think with DFS, it may take a longer period of time. But the CFTC issue, it's an existential threat. That if the two court decisions that have come out in Kalshi's favor so far are correct, it could uh, uh, you make the state regulated and tribal regulated sports betting industries irrelevant. And of all the threats that we've talked about, I still believe that the CFTC prediction market Kalshi product is the most worrisome.
Yeah, and yesterday the Mescalero Apache was asking the Attorney General in New Mexico to go after Calci also. They want to be part of that too. So you're still seeing movement on this. It's nowhere near the end. Go ahead, Scott.
But yeah, a case in point about, my frustration with Newsom and Bonta is 34 states filed an amicus brief in the Third Circuit appeal on the same day that the tribes did. Um, all, making it clear that, this was an affront, not just to tribal sovereignty, but to state sovereignty. In California was not among.
Well,
Right.
Scott, listen, you and I, again, I hate to say this, we've been around a long time. And last time I checked, governors come and governors go. You know what I mean? And we're still here,
We're
brother.
still here.
It's gonna take
Still
Bonta
here.
2
We're
years
not going
to do
anywhere,
his
man.
analysis on CFTC. So,
We're not going anywhere. Here we are.
Just coming back to his DFS opinion, there's great language in that opinion that makes it clear that what, Kalshi is doing, is gaming and illegal, under the Commodities Exchange Act. So, which makes it, more frustrating to see that they'll issue this terrific opinion in the DFS context and not sign on to a brief that 34 attorney generals from other states to sign on to. It just doesn't make any sense.
Listen, I'm creating a TikTok dance for it, so don't you worry. I'm gonna get this thing above the social media thing. I've been studying these kids. I went to VidCon a couple weeks ago, so I'm now an expert on the youth, the Utes. You know what I mean?
right.
So, gentlemen, please listen.
Okay.
We're close to the end. I think there's a couple questions in here. I haven't checked on any of them.
Just Ed.
Hey guys, listen, if you're gonna do anonymous, we're not gonna answer your questions. You're gonna have to put your names. Hey Patrick, best way to battle these companies is to own the asset class. Okay. So I guess and then Ed. So anyhow, listen, thanks, Ed.
Yeah.
Always great to have you. We really appreciate you joining us. I think we probably answered your questions in our conversation. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being available to have this conversation.
We're going to be at the Oklahoma Indian Gaming Show next week in Oklahoma City. If anyone's there, love to talk to you folks that are listening. And
Yeah, and then we're working on the mid-year, and then in Minnesota we're going to be spend a half day talking about these issues, sweepstakes, DFS, and all this new form of gambling and stuff. So this conversation continues, and I'm sure we'll be having it at G2E2.
right.
So again, everyone, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate your questions, and please don't be anonymous. We want to answer your questions, but we're not going to answer anonymous. We put your name behind your opinion. We appreciate it. Okay, Scott, thank you. Joe, thank you.
Thank you,
Jason,
guys.
thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week. Chairman Stevens is going to join us next week and do a recap of everything. So, all right, guys, thank you. Bye
Thank you,
bye.
guys.
Thanks, Victor. Thanks,
Take
everybody.
care.
Thanks, everyone.